Rent to rent, one of the most popular ways of creating passive income and growing a portfolio quickly because of the high potential income. Welcome to Momentum Property Education. My name is Daniel Wood. I'm one of the founders. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel because every single week we give you updates on what's going on in the economy, interview with top experts from all over the world, and videos just like today where we show you how you can create passive income as safely and quickly as possible. So today we're going to get into rent to rent, which is a very, very exciting strategy. And if this is something you want to learn more of, please hit that like button because it tells YouTube that this is the type of videos you're interested in looking at. And as a thank you, because obviously it helps us get the word out to more people, we have a partnership with Eden Reforestation Projects who will actually plant a tree for each like that you give on this or any of our other YouTube videos. So please click that like button like crazy so that we can plant more trees and make an even bigger impact. Thank you. So rent to rent. What is rent to rent? Let's start there. What is rent to rent? Well, the idea is basically that you rent a property that you then rent out to someone else and you make a margin in these difference. So you're paying a rent to a landlord and you're charging rent from someone else and you make the difference there in between. This essentially means you don't have to buy the property. It's a very cheap way. If you don't have a lot of capital, you can get into a rent-to-rent deal and start generating income, which will allow you to start building your own portfolio. So it's a very good starter strategy, or of course, for more experienced investors, it's a great way to expand their portfolio and do a lot of these deals as you can generate quite massive passive income pretty quickly. So let's look at the details here. So a rent-to-rent has, as with everything, two parts, expenses and income. Now, your expenses for a rent-to-rent are a little different from when you own a property. Instead of having a mortgage, you will have rent to the landlord. You will also have your running costs, so the cost it takes actually to get it rented out. So in our example here, we're looking at a service department, meaning we're renting it out through booking.com or Airbnb or HomeAway or a site like that. So short-term rentals, we're talking, week by week or even a couple days that someone lives there. Could be tourists, could be business travelers, could be contractors that just are in the area for a short amount of time and then go. So they will want to rent your property to live in for a few days or a week or two. So the running costs will be the cost it takes to, keep running the property. That will be, your Wi-Fi, your council tax. Yes, it's your responsibility to pay the council tax because just like if you own a buy-to-let and you rent it out, the tenant pays the council tax. Well, in this case, we're that tenant and then we're short-term letting it out. So we have to pay the council tax. You'll have, TV license, electrics, utilities, all those kind of running costs. You'll also have costs for actually getting people in the door. So if you're renting out through Airbnb and booking.com, they will take 15% at the time of this recording, 15% of the rent. So when someone books a night on Airbnb, 15% will instantly be withheld for Airbnb's profit. They'll also charge a 3% credit card fee, so it's actually 18% that's going away. And then if you don't want to run the property yourself, you will have a management agent, a lettings agent that will run this for you, and they'll charge between 15 and 20% of the rent. So right away, you can see if, let's say it's 20%, that's 38% of the gross rent that is disappearing on the way, and you have these other expenses. So how are we going to get this property to actually make a profit? Well, that comes down to what is your occupancy, meaning how often is this rented out, right? 30 days in a month? Is it going to be rented for 10 days, for 20 days, for 29 days, or even for all 30 days? That has a huge impact on your rent, as well as what are they paying for each night. If you get these two well, you'll have a very profitable property. If they don't, well, then these costs can eat you alive. And that's why it's important to really, really understand your rent-to-rent properties before you get into the deal, because these costs can quickly make this a losing deal. And again, remember, you don't actually own the asset. So if it's also costing you money every month, well, that's not very fun, is it? So make sure you're doing the right deal. Let's look at how we can affect the occupancy rate and rent. Now, in the UK, the average occupancy is 70% on serviced apartments. Now, does that mean that you're going to have 70% occupancy? No, absolutely not. This actually has nothing to do with your property. This is the average in the UK. The three determining factors that are going to determine your occupancy rate are your location, right? Do people want to go here? Is it central in a big city? Is it close to universities, close to companies, close to anything that people want to travel to, tourism? Your reviews will be huge, right? If people are writing negative reviews, other people won't want to stay there. If there are multiple properties in the area, they'll always choose one of the other ones. Also, if you don't have any reviews, you'll generally have a hard time renting it out, which is why it's hard at the beginning of a rent to rent, because at the beginning, you don't have reviews and it can take time before you start getting positive reviews and the property really gets started. We usually it takes about 6 months to really get going with a rent to rent. And then your interior design, that is huge. All of these three will affect the rent you can charge and the occupancy you will have. Now, one of our students, they did an amazingly special designed property that from day one was rented out at 100% for 5 months. It took about 3 weeks of marketing to get it 5 months, 100% occupancy at premium rates, because they'd done an amazing job at the design. They had a good location. And as soon as people started living there, the reviews started pouring in. So that just kept going. So if you get these right, you can do very, very well. But you got to do your due diligence first. Don't expect to get better than the average. But if you do, that's something we cheer for. So what is it we're looking for? Well, so if we look at the numbers, when we're looking at a rent-to-rent deal, what we're looking at is we're going to have upfront costs, right? When we acquire the property, we're going to have to furnish it. We have to make sure it's up to regulations. So you can Google those regulations. They are essentially the same as an hotel. It has to be fireproofed, fire doors, emergency exits. All these things need to be in place. You also have to make sure that the regulations on you even being allowed to do this is correct. We don't have the chance to go through this in this video. We cover it in other videos here on our channel. So keep an eye on the Momentum Property Education channel. You can hit the subscribe button below to make sure you don't miss anything. Well, let's say you know that. Let's say your upfront cost, getting everything up to regulation, furnished, maybe some upfront rent, maybe that costs you £10,000. Now, if you have spent £10,000, your goal is to make that back. Most rent-to-rent contracts go for about 3 years. Sometimes they're rolling year by year. Sometimes it's a 3-year contract at once. Sometimes there's break clauses. Sometimes there's not. So there's details in there. But usually it's about a 3-year commitment from both sides, which means that you have 3 years to make your £10,000 back, plus hopefully some profit. Now, how do we make sure that happens? Well, I always look at what is the most likely scenario and what is the worst case scenario. I know you could also look at the best case scenario, but for me, if I'm happy with the most likely scenario, best case is just an extra bonus, right? I made extra money. Yay. So I look at the worst case. Now, let's use this example. I spent £10,000 and it's a 3-year contract. Worst case, for example, if there's a lockdown in the UK. Well, average in the UK during lockdown was that occupancy fell from 70% to about 50%. Now, if I'm in a good area, good location, well-designed property, I'm still looking at about that 50-55% occupancy. If I see that I'll make a profit of £3,300, 33% of my investment every year, well, that means that even if we have a 3-year lockdown, I should break even on this deal. I won't lose money. I won't make anything, but if we have lockdown for 3 years and I have a rent to rent and I'm break even, I'm very happy with it. This is the key to property investing, is how do you keep yourself safe? The money will come if you're keeping yourself safe. This is Warren Buffett's number 1 rule of investing, is don't lose money. Number 2 is look at number 1 again. All right. Number 3 is don't use debt, which is something we do tend to use as property investors, but it's worth kind of keeping in mind, is don't use stupid debt. So we follow what Warren Buffett says very, very closely. So worst case, we want to make sure that we'll make our money back over 3 years. Most likely is I want to make my entire investment back in 1 year. So I want to make £10,000 a year, which means in a 3-year deal, I'm making £30,000. So I spend 10, I make 30 back. That means I can get more rent to rents if I want, or I can take those 30,000, I can put that into a regular property, one that I own. So this is how I use rent to rent to build my portfolio. Remember, this is not cash flow, because after 3 years, most likely this property will not be in my control anymore and it goes back to the owner, which means I need to make sure that if I'm going to start living off my rent to rent portfolio, that I have long-term income, so that I'm taking some of that profit and putting into properties that I own myself. I hope this makes sense. Please make sure you like this video. We'll plant a tree. We like doing that, but also it tells YouTube that this is something you want to learn more about. It will give you better recommended videos. Please make sure you subscribe, because every week we got new updates for you where we'll help you on your journey. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and I hope to see you again soon.